O God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Talking about God's judgment, it's tricky. Tricky thing to do. But Isaiah the prophet explains it to us in a song. He sings us a song about judgment. So I invite you to think back to yesteryear, generations ago, and imagine that you are in a tavern. And in the tavern, there are young and old men gathered around, and they are lifting their glasses and singing their tavern songs of love. Are you there? Can you hear the music in the tavern? Can you hear those young tenor voices singing? And then one young man steps forward to sing what is an epic love song. A love song about a groom who builds a vineyard for his beloved, for his bride. And the first verse he sings is about the fertile hill that has been chosen. Not just any hill, but the most fertile land. Just imagine him having to spend the lion's share of his inheritance just to purchase that best soil. And not just any hill, one that allows his vineyard to be in the sunlight so that there's nothing obstructing it, the perfect place. And then everyone else in the bar joins in the chorus, singing about the groom who grew a vineyard for his beloved, and they clink their glasses and they imagine that they had a beloved themselves. And then this young man, he sings a verse about digging and plowing, back-breaking work, commanding with authority the oxen that are pulling the plow, the stones that are obstacles to his work and how they need to be picked, lifted, and moved. And then in the chorus, all of the young men raise their glasses and they sing to the groom who is planting a vineyard to his beloved, and they imagine that they too had the strength and perseverance to build something so wonderful for their love. And then the young tenor sings about the vines that he selected. Not just any vines, but we imagine him going from vineyard to vineyard, exploring what is the best wine and what are the vines that produced that fruit, and him haggling with vineyard owners for those special vines. And he purchases them and he plants them and he nurtures them. And all the other men in the bar sing in the chorus about the young man who planted a vineyard for his beloved, and the old men, they think back to their beloveds and what it's like to have someone to call your own. The young man continues singing a verse about the watchtower. All of those stones that were lifted up and moved and piled form this watchtower in the center of the vineyard so that he can keep his vineyard safe. That no vermin can enter, no thief can steal in the middle of the night. All is safe. And a chorus strikes up, and the young and the old men raise their glass to sing about the young man who built a vineyard for his beloved, and they think back to what it is like to have the safety of a home, the safety of a beloved, their own watchtower. And then the young man sings about how he's taken the great cedars of Lebanon, and hewn from that wood the planks necessary for the vats in which these grapes are fermented, singing about the patience that comes season after season to take these grapes and make the most beautiful wine. And then all of the young men in the tavern sing together, raising their glass, about their perseverance, about generation to generation of love, the patience it takes to build something that is strong and loving. And as the song crescendos, this young tenor sings about the grapes that he's expecting will be produced from this beautiful vineyard that he's created. The music crescendos and everyone feels the excitement in the room, anticipating that these vines will produce the grapes that produce the wine that produces the home season after season for his beloved. And then everything turns sour. And the young man's song ends by saying, and yet it yielded wild grapes. No one in the tavern was expecting that twist. No one in the tavern was expecting that all of that hard work by this young groom would end with something tainting his vineyard, producing grapes that will not produce a fine wine. You cannot fault any one of those men in the tavern for feeling angry, feeling disappointed, feeling frustrated. You wouldn't fault the old men in that tavern who are upset, judging what has happened to spoil the fruit of all of this labor. We wouldn't fault any one of us thinking about what was done that caused all of that hard work to be tainted. Isaiah's allusion is pretty straightforward. He's alluding to the notion that despite all of the work of the groom in building faithfully this vineyard, the bride has not been faithful, and that there's been a tainting of all the work that has gone into creating this perfect home, this perfect life. You wouldn't fault any one of us for wanting to judge anyone who's done that to us. You wouldn't fault any one of us for being angry and judgmental when that's been done to us. Isaiah is giving us a song about God's judgment and letting us know that you can't fault God for feeling upset and judgmental when we, the children of God, are unfaithful in response to the blessings from all of the hard work that God has done in creation for us. And so what Isaiah does is he shifts. We move from a tavern to a courthouse. We're now before a judge, and there the man who's created this vineyard complains to the judge, I want justice. What more could I have done? I did everything lovingly, painstakingly, and yet, despite my faithfulness, I've been betrayed. God is upset. And here's the anatomy of judgment. Tell me if this seems familiar to you. When we've been wronged, when we've been offended, when someone's been unfaithful to us, we hope that the offender will see on our face the impact of their harm. But if they don't, if they can't see the clues before them, then we invite in witnesses. We invite in an audience, and we tell our story. We make our complaint, and we invite those witnesses as though we're in a court of law to hear our evidence for the harm that's been given to us. And in so doing, we take a risk. Because the risk is that when we tell our story of being harmed and ask someone to judge between us and our offender, maybe we were in the wrong. Maybe we started something. It's a vulnerability that comes from judgment. Maybe I'll have to face my own actions, my own complicity in this awful situation. But if we bring our offender to court before witnesses, and still, after hearing all of the evidence and hearing people take our side, they still do not understand their offense, in our society, that's when punishment is meted out. To wake someone up, to let them know, if you can't, through empathy, understand the impact of your actions, then we're going to punish you. We're going to break something of yours. We're going to let you experience firsthand what your victim has experienced. And if after punishment still there is no understanding of the offense, then there is lament. In this passage by Isaiah is letting us know that we cannot fault God, who has worked to bless us, for anger and judgment. We cannot fault God for having those reactions to us, because we have been oblivious, despite God's calls, despite the witnesses of prophetic witness that has come before us, despite threats of punishment, we remain with our eyes closed. There is something about judgment and anger. There's something about being harmed by others that attracts a crowd. There's misery, there's good company in misery. This is the leather seat from the Carrie Underwood video. I did some research this week and I discovered that not everybody in the congregation is a country music fan. But I expect that some of you have heard Carrie Underwood's song. And before I go to the lyrics, what I noticed at karaoke is almost every karaoke event, some young woman gets up and she sings this Carrie Underwood song. It's a song about a young woman being cheated on and her revenge. And I swear, the moment that one woman stands up to sing the song, there is this electric bond that creates with every single woman in the room. And the rest of us just know, slowly, let it happen. But I don't know if you know the tune, maybe we can rewind. And take that and add anger to it. The lyrics are, and he don't know, and he don't know, this is the revenge, I dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped up four-wheel drive. So you make sure that you destroy something that the guy loves more than you, so that his eyes are opened. Carved my name into his leather seats, and I took a Louisville Slugger to both headlights, slashed a hole in all four tires, and maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. That song and its universal appeal was 64 weeks on the Billboard Hot 100. That's the 8th longest chart stay in history. Why? Because we as human beings know what it means to build a vineyard, invest everything we have in it, only to have someone destroy it and its hope and its potential. This is why it's so difficult to talk about judgment and the judgment of God. Because we don't like the idea of a God who is angry, wrathful. We've seen too much of Christianity take that idea of a wrathful God and weaponize it against whatever group we want to harm, without any consideration that we have offended God. We don't like the idea of a God who is judgmental. Our God should be like a always loving parent. Well, I don't know about you, but I do recall a few times when I made my parents angry, and their job was to judge between right and wrong in my actions. In an interview about the song, Carrie Underwood said that she's not inclined to do anything like what the song. She didn't write the song. The song was written by a couple of men, and maybe they wrote it from their own personal experience, learning the hard way. But Carrie Underwood says that's not her style. Keying a paint job or taking a baseball bat to the headlights. In the interview, she said she's more of a, just move on kind of person. Here's the thing about God and what Isaiah is letting us know. Despite our offense, and despite these complaints by God, the expression of anger and judgment from God, in the rest of the passage I read, God is saying, I'm going to, not with a Louisville Slugger, but I'm going to knock down the walls. I'm going to tear down the hedges. I'm going to destroy all of this hard work that I've done because I am so angry. That's God's expression of anger. But despite that anger, despite the judgment against us, despite our continued lack of faithfulness, God rebuilds a vineyard for us. God is busy, despite being judgmental, despite that judgment being justified, despite God's anger being reasonable, despite our repeated unfaithfulness as children of God, God remains faithful, hopeful, and persistent. God would plant another vineyard for you, despite your faithfulness. God would plant another vineyard for me, despite my unfaithfulness. That God would do so on fertile land, again find choice vines, again build the safest watchtower, and produce the best wine, and invite us around the table to celebrate. God is creating for us a new vineyard, a new Eden, for us to receive God's grace. That is the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen.